Okay. Glad to get started here. I actually had a little bit of a hiccup, but that's okay. We survived. Super happy about tonight. My guest on tonight is Robert Hyman. Robert and I go back, holy cow, we go back 30 years. It's 30 years this year, I believe. Met in 1990. And yes, 1990 was 30 years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. So please welcome to the show, Robert Hyman. Rob, how you doing?
Good, Ivan. How are you?
What's up, Mike? Uh,
Seems like only yesterday.
it does seem like yesterday, and I mean it really does. It's funny how we met. Do you remember exactly the sequence, the two ads thing? Do you remember that? Can you tell
I
that
do
story?
not.
You don't. So I was in a band in Atlanta, and you and Bob, who we would end up going on to be in a band together, you guys put out an ad for looking for a guitar player. But the way he worded the ad was like it was like raw. I mean, it was like crazy. Like it was like you were looking for some, like Black Sabbath guy or something. And and I was like,
Must have
nah,
been just a bad
it was bad. It was. I mean,
misinterpretation.
I did misinterpret.
Yeah,
You didn't put any bands. You didn't put any bands I recognized. But it was mostly like dark, brooding, whatever. And
yeah, and
uh,
heavy.
and I just completely ignored it. I'm like, there's a satanic cult I just narrowly avoided. And so, uh, and then like a week later, like a couple of weeks later, I think you and a conversation that we had was that you guys had decided that yeah, we didn't. The ad wasn't worded right, and you guys reworded the ad, and I knew it was the same ad, but same group. But I was like, well, this sounds a little different. And then I responded to the ad, and then the rest is the rest. But you don't remember
Yeah,
that? That was
I no. I mean, we used to do some weird like bands before that. We did one before that was like must be into like I don't know weird stuff, and then the last one was Crazy Bread, like Little Caesar's Crazy Bread, because we used to practice on Sundays, and that's what we'd break, for lunch, and there was a Little Caesars close by, so we used to go out there and get Crazy Bread for lunch.
and
So we're like,
when
well, someone's got to be able to eat that to be in this band. So
and when when we first met, so 1990, I would have been in my early 20s, and I think you're 2 or 3 years younger than me. You had already been playing drums for a long time. Like since sixth, seventh
yeah,
grade or something.
yeah. So I think since I was like 9, that at some point along in my history, I was like, oh, I think I've been playing since I was 9. I figured that out. So
And you had a really nice kit. I remember you had a really nice kit. And you were
yeah,
really, and you are,
I still have that kit too.
yeah, you are a really good
You and I
drummer.
are old. My drum kit is old. My drum kit's almost 40 years old.
Holy
So
cow! Yeah, my guitar. I've got a guitar that's 30 something years old. That's crazy, and I bought it new. Um, you were good back then, though. I mean, you're good now, no doubt about it. But you were a great drummer back then, and you had been playing with Bob for a little bit. You guys had done a couple of projects together, and you guys had
yeah,
already kind of gelled. But you just were like this. You didn't play. You weren't like what I'd call a pocket drummer. You played like intricate parts that weren't too busy and weren't too bombastic, but they were still very full sounding.
yeah.
Tell me how that kind of came about. How did you kind of develop your style? You're a late teenager, early 20s. What were you? And you were a Georgia State student, right? And so, what were you? What was kind of your
Yeah.
mindset?
Um, well, I think it like probably around the time I was like 15 or so. Like prior to that,
Sure.
like my musical influences were like Rush and Kiss and Van Halen. Rest in peace,
Yeah, no doubt,
Eddie.
no doubt.
You know, like hard rock bands and stuff like that. And obviously Rush, like very progressive. Um, and then I just kind of did like this 180 and totally got into like the new wave thing. My older brother, or my only brother, Todd, he's 2 years older, was like into U2. He introduced me to U2, and it just like something just switched as soon as I heard started listening to some of that music, it was just like, holy cow, this is the stuff that I need to get into. And I remember even like taking my vinyl collection at the time, going down to the record store I used to love to go to, and I just cashed in like all of it. It was just like get rid of it and just traded it for like Police records and U2 records and Simple Minds and Missing Persons and New Order, stuff like that. And it's funny, like the thing I've always kind of like reflected on my head is kind of this idea of like the chicken or the egg. Like do you get into music because it's sort of predetermined, like you've got a slant for it and you just have to get introduced to it? Because when stuff like that happened to me, it was just like a light bulb went off and it was just like, yeah. And the thing I loved about so many of those bands was the idea of like all of the band members were very distinctive in the way that they played.
Sure.
From the drummer to the guitar, and it was like, if you remove anyone from the Police, it is not the same band anymore.
Right.
If you remove anyone from U2, it's not the same band anymore. And I think that's the thing that like sort of triggered for me. I sort of registered was like, these drummers that just had a very distinctive sound. It's almost like you knew it was them by the way they played, by the parts that they
Sure.
played, and so it wasn't like I was looking for it. It just came, I got introduced to it and it was like, wow. And it's funny, I even went through like a very long period of sort of even just purging all of that mentality of like, oh, let me just play this straight ahead drum beat. I like literally like, no, I'm not going to play that. I'm going to try to play something else, which I think kind of just forced me into trying to find my own voice,
Well, and I think it's interesting that you say that, and we'll play some samples throughout the show of some of Robert's work. But I think it's interesting that you say that because looking back and looking at the stuff you've done, the stuff that I did, by your side, and then the stuff that you did, I mean, you've done volumes and things, since then. Like all of those bands were like, they weren't, everybody knows the Edge was a great drummer. I mean, guitar player, everybody knows that. But I mean, he was able to pull back. He was, playing 1-2 note things. And it contributed to the song without overtaking the song. And the drums and the bass really did carry, and, the vocal melodies really did carry that. And looking at a lot of the projects you've done, that's kind of been the thing. Where the guitar has been there and it's nice space, but you're such a powerful drummer, and I don't mean in an overbearing way. I mean in just that like you've got your space and you utilize it very well. And so it's interesting that I hadn't really thought about the whole. I do remember now that you were a big U2 fan, and you've been in bands without guitar players at all.
Yeah.
And they sound great and full. And I think, for a lot of people, it'd be like a band without a guitar player. What's that about? And
yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, but it works. It works for you really well. I mean, right? So I want to actually play. Let me get this pulled up here. I want to play. This was a band that you were in before UsherHouse. And for those of you who are listening for the first time, Robert and I were in a band called UsherHouse together. But before that, we did some different things. And so I want to play this song. This is a song by a band called A Clearing. Now, tell me about this band.
That was pretty much my first real band.
Okay.
Was, I think, like sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really even bother getting into bands so much in high school because I didn't really know anybody and et cetera. And it was once I got to college, I met people and it's like, oh, okay. I want to get into a band. And so, yeah, I met Richard Coker. And he was like the first one that I really like sort of hit it off with. Like we were very symbiotic, we're still friends now. and still, influential to each other, like exchanging music and whatnot. But he answered an ad. I was playing with somebody else at the time. He actually answered as a bass player, and although he's like more classically trained as a guitar player,
He's a great guitar player. He's an amazing guitar player, and he kind of
yeah,
fits that.
he's very studied a lot of like prog rock and could play all that stuff, but like me, he got into new wave, and so we kind of hit it off over like the Cure and the Smiths, and then we met Ross Bernhardt, who was our yeah, you know Ross.
I know Ross. Yeah.
He was our hardcore bass player from Michigan. This is in Georgia when I lived down in Georgia, obviously when you and I met and et cetera. But so yeah, it was like the first real thing that like really worked as a band and like wrote covers. I don't think we ever played wrote originals. I don't think we ever played any covers other than to just goof around.
Right.
It was my first sort of like band love, first band I fell in love with playing in. And
Well, let me play this song. This song is called The Garden. And we'll play about 15, 20 seconds. We'll talk more about it on the other side. So hold on to get this going.
sure.
I gotta say, I know you played a lot of this material for me. I mean, literally 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
But I love going back and listening to like material like this. Tell me how this was recorded first. Tell me how was this recorded?
Live to 2-track.
Live to 2 tracks.
Yeah. So as you know, when I was at Georgia State, I started at a community college, didn't know what I wanted to do, did my first year at community college, and then met actually the bass player I was playing with when I met Rich. He was studying recording at Georgia State. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You can study audio recording, like studio stuff in a university? And it blew my mind. I'm like, okay, that's what I got to do. That's what I got to love. That's what I love. Not that I had any experience with it, but I was just really interested in it.
Sure.
And I think I had a 4-track at the time. So that's why I went to Georgia State. So I was into recording. I don't know why, for some reason, as a drummer, I've always ended up like, as a drummer, I already have more equipment than everybody else does anyway. But I was also the guy who had like the PA
Right.
as well. And I had that, I don't know if you remember that old Carvin
Yeah.
PA,
yeah.
like 12-channel PA mixer. And that's what we recorded through. Mic'd it up. Everything was, so-called, professionally, independently mic'd.
Mm-hmm.
And, it sort of thing, like I would probably spend the day before, like, trying to record my drums and just practicing, like, just playing stuff to cassette. It was all recorded on cassette, just to kind of get levels, and then we'd spend the next day running through. But, as you know, live to 2-track, you make a mess, you screw up or whatever. Oh, got to do it again.
Right.
And I've got tapes full of, take 6, take 7, but yeah, it was all live to 2-track.
Yeah. like a
And I've
really
got a
good.
lot of stuff from that band that's done that way.
Well, I think it sounds really good. I mean, and the mix is good. I mean, it sounds really good. The song itself is great. But I love, and that makes it even better knowing that it was recorded basically live to two track. I love going back and listening to, that material because you've got that, now you've got that perspective. And I think that song holds up. I think it holds up really well. Now, this next song is Cooling Tower Down. Now, this is some of the same people, right? This is some of the who's in this.
Yeah, so this is after the clearing, and Rich and I stayed together.
Okay.
And this is Tracy Van Voris, who was a friend in school, and then Bob. This is when I met Bob.
So how did you meet Bob? Hold on, pause the story here. How did you meet? And Bob was also the drummer. I'm sorry, the bass player for UsherHouse. How did you meet? How did you meet Bob?
I mean, I just met him through Rich. Honestly, like Rich went to Georgia State, which was probably another reason I went to Georgia State. But yeah, he kind of had this clique of like 8 to 10 people that were all his friends. I didn't know any of them, but he was my in. And so I just started hanging out with them. And Bob was one of them, but like we never saw Bob because
he's Bob.
Well, as you remember, Bob was a guy that like worked like 3 jobs and was going to school full time, played rugby. He was just never around. He hardly even slept, let alone.
He had a 4 o'clock in the morning job. He had a day of school. He had some other job after thing. He had band practice, and then he had rugby where he would regularly get knocked unconscious.
Yes. I saw him one time get hit and just go backwards like this, I was like, oh God, he's dead. Bob's dead. Yeah, so he just, he wasn't around much. And, we would hang out, like at school, we'd hang out in between classes and whatnot, it'd be like, oh, let's, meet in the cafeteria or whatever. And so, yeah, that's how I met Bob, because he was a friend of Rich's.
Let's play this song. I don't think I realized that Bob was on this song. So let me get this going, and we'll talk about it here in just a bit.
Well, as soon as you hear it, you'll probably be able to figure it out.
That's what I'm wondering.
We're not making a joke out of this. There's a person who's breaking in and eating and living in this school. But if he's going to make money off of us, we're going to make money off of him. Manufactured legend by the PTA. First there was Jaws, now there's the Creeper. Get your t-shirt for $8. Come on, support your team. Where's your school spirit? I've heard some say that he's a threat. A threat, no way. He wants small change.
Hell yeah.
That was a great band.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And that is definitely Bob on bass. No doubt.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, like, I think how we decided, we want to play with Bob was he was in another band, and the 3 of us went to see him play like a open mic night or something.
Okay.
And he played with kind of a Southern rock sort of, just middle of the road sort of band. But he had his fretless, and he was bobbing all over the place, the way he plays. And we just all kind of looked at each other like, why aren't we playing with him? Like, why don't we play with him? Because he was just fantastic, Bob's, I think, completely self-taught. So everything he picked up was just sort of like whatever, through osmosis or whatever. But,
right.
He just had such a unique style, like as I've talked to people now, like the only guy that could manage to play like sort of goth industrial, but still like add funk and slapping to it.
Right.
Like, how does that work?
And
I don't know, but he made it work.
He
You
had
know,
great tone too. How was that song recorded? How the song that we just heard? Is it Tower Down? Is that what the name of it is? Yeah. Oh no,
Cooling Tower.
Creeper. Cooling Tower Down was the name of the band. What? How was
Yeah,
that song recorded?
I think same thing. Two
Same
track.
thing.
It's funny. We did a thing when I was in school. We would do recording labs, and we'd need like bands to come in and play so that we
Okay.
could practice recording and whatever. And we actually did like 2 or 3 songs on like 24 track 2-inch for my lab. I don't have any tapes of it because we did a really good recording of that song on 24 track or whatever, and I don't have it. I don't know where it is.
Oh, that would
So,
be an amazing thing to find. I'm sure it's long gone, but so
yeah, I've exhausted my archives at this point.
so this is roughly around the time then that you and I and like I said, your groups had apparently started to go their own way, and you and Bob decided to do a thing, and then that's how we met.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
After Cooling Tower Down, we did one other band with Rich, the three
Okay.
of us. East Opium Company. You know, just these names that just roll off your tongue. You know.
That's a great name. It's a
And we did that. It was relatively short lived. I think probably 6-8 months, something like that. And then basically Bob and I found ourselves with okay, no, we're not playing with Rich anymore. What are we doing? And that's when I think we started to run the ads. So that was probably early 1990.
It's all about the marketing. That first wording was was terrible. I remember meeting you guys, and the thing that I liked about it was that because you had this background, you were willing to do something new, but you guys knew how to play together and gel and
Yeah.
click and all that kind of stuff. And between honestly, you guys were just almost a band by yourselves. I mean, you guys could definitely fill the space. But that was right around the time you were, if I remember correctly, you were both wrapping up your degrees, and now you've got a decision to make. One that I'm sure every parent dreads. What do I do with my life? And tell me about that. Tell me how that went down.
Yeah. So I think around the time we met you and started playing together, I think we both were we had about a year left. Bob was on his second degree, but I was on my
Right.
first. And we were both supposed to finish up around, when did we move to Chicago? Was it 91, wasn't it?
91.
Yeah, 91. So it was, the fall of 91. So I think it was like September, October is when we were supposed to be done. And, us together in UsherHouse, we were very serious as a band. Like, oh, we want to do this. We want to be rock stars.
Right.
And Atlanta just wasn't the place for a goth industrial band to make a mark. And so I remember collectively, the four of us were like, we need to go somewhere. We need to get out of town and go somewhere where it'll be, more beneficial for us. And I'm pretty positive we considered we had 3 cities: Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco. And I think, Brian from UsherHouse used to live in Chicago. So he was kind of familiar with it. And then I think when we thought about it, it was like, well, it's center of the country. Makes sense of if you want to go East Coast, you're halfway there. West Coast, you're, close to halfway. Just felt central. And what was it? I think it was the July 4th holiday. Brian made some connections. The 4 of us came up to Chicago.
Yeah, we went up and we hung out for a few days and ended up having that long talk one night about we decided not to look at any other cities. We felt like Chicago had clicked right away. That's a big...
One of the things was, that at least from my side that I remember was we went to Avalon and we saw Stabbing Westward play, of
Yeah.
all bands.
Right.
And
With
I
the
was
trumpet.
like, okay.
Stabbing Westward with
I'm
the
like,
trumpet.
okay, yeah, done. You know, they were fantastic. The room was packed. I'm like, yeah, this is our town. This is where we need to be.
Yeah. But the mindset though of going from, we're in our early 20s, and you got to admit, this is a time when, your family has expectations of what they want you to do. And then you have that talk, mom, dad, guess what? And how did that go? How did that go with your parents?
It was, it's funny because I've talked to them about it since, and it was funny because they were always like massively supported. Like, I think my mom, if she could figure out the technology, is watching this right now, because she's like, oh my God, I gotta watch. And as you remember, they used to come to our shows. They used to videotape them for us and stuff. They were, always hugely supportive. I all my bands rehearsed in our house.
That's right.
For the most part. We rehearsed in the basement, and they would put up with 2-3 hours of band rehearsal once, twice a week, and yeah, just, amazing support. But it really was kind of a non-issue. And it's funny because for me, it didn't even dawn on me that like, oh, I was leaving home. It really didn't occur to me. All I was thinking about was like, ever since I got into bands, it's like, I love being in a band. And as it got more serious, it was just like, we got to do whatever we got to do to make this work. And it was never about like, oh, if I make that decision, this is what I'm leaving behind. It just never occurred to me. And, to their credit, obviously they supported me, but at the same time, they were like, look, you went to college, you graduated from college, you did everything we as parents wanted you to do. So we were fine with it, and so they, I know it broke their heart. And, again, reflecting on it, I realized years later, it was like, oh my God, I left home.
You did,
but it didn't feel like that to me at the time. So it was just all about chasing my dream,
Do you remember, and I'm assuming you do, and this kind of goes into this whole, and I love that you just said chasing your dream. Because there is this, the mindset of woulda, coulda, shoulda. And, there's this thing I want to do, and I'd like to give it my best shot. And it's funny because when I was kind of around that same time, I was, what am I gonna do too? And my dad really came through for me, because the rest of my family was not very happy about the idea of being a musician full time. And my dad was the one that really kind of stepped up. But do you remember that talk that night that we all sat down and were like, what are we doing? And like, are we talking about
in Chicago or
no? It was in Atlanta, and it was the four of us, and we had this big talk about what we're saying is we've got everything to lose, and the chance of gaining anything is slim. But do we try this with give it our best shot, and walk away from it knowing that that's what we did? Or do we take this thing and just, make it as a hobby and keep playing shows around town, and, which were fun too. Do you remember that conversation? It was in the living room at Tucker.
Not as specifically as the one in Chicago, but I do remember, obviously, at some point it came down to that of like,
maybe it was in Chicago. Maybe we did have it in Chicago where it was
well, I think we decided prior to that, because
we were looking
of like, oh, we're gonna go somewhere, we just got to figure out where. I just remember the talk in Chicago of like, okay, Chicago's the place.
No, this talk happened before that, and it was are we gonna live our dream talk and start looking, because all these places were like in different cities, and we were gonna have to make big changes and things like that, and then we ended up doing it. and Chicago
Yeah.
ended up being a very good move.
Yeah.
And as a result, UsherHouse gets signed because of its first show, our first show in Chicago. Do you remember how that played out? Can you tell us about that?
Um,
We played at Neo.
well, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, the sort of chain events that
Yeah, it
were
was
part
a
of that, right?
very specific like chain of events, and it's just crazy how
I, I,
stuff works out.
I probably don't remember all of them, but I think you and I talked about this a while back. So I think you filled in the holes, but I know we did the show at Neo. We had been there, maybe a couple months or something.
If even
And
that.
yeah. And, and the way we moved, that you and Brian were already here in Chicago before Bob and I, you guys came up and sort of found a place for us to live and whatnot. Um, and we're obviously already sort of spreading the word about us and talking to people because, that was the good old days where the only way people heard about you is if you were, at a club talking to people.
Putting up
And,
flyers, handing out
yeah, word
tickets,
of
going
mouth.
on this, getting on the street,
Yeah.
all that stuff. I mean, there was.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so we did that Neo show and it was like, I guess a big success. It's not.
Oh, Rob, I lost you. You got a little technical difficulty here. Hold on a second.
There we are.
Here we go.
It's a small room. It's not even a room that like bands play in.
Right.
And but who was it? Was it Jam that was there? The woman that worked at Tower?
No, the first show was the bartender. And I can't remember his name, but he really liked it. Said something to one of the Tower Records employees that helped put together the Pulse, the Tower little thing.
Her name was Jam, wasn't it?
Something like that. And she came out to the second show that we played there, which was not that long later.
Cubby Bear.
And
Wasn't it?
no, it was Neo again. And
Oh, really?
yeah, we played Neo. The bartender really liked it, said something to her and said, they're playing at the club again. Come check them out. She showed up, did an interview with us, and now I'm starting to lose names, but then another writer read that article, had contact Renee. That's right. Renee and Fluffy had found out read that article, contacted us. Renee was friends with Brian Pereira, and he had this is all within, very short period of time, said, are you aware of any Chicago bands looking for, this kind of thing? And she said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. She had 2 or 3 bands in mind, and we were one of them. So she calls us up and says, hey, put together something real quick. And as I recall, we scrambled and put together a press kit, and we sent it out to Brian, and then we got signed.
But the good thing was we already had our stuff together though.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, we scrambled, but we were always good about we had the press kit together.
Mm-hmm.
We probably updated it or something. It was the whole Kinko's. I still have, I think, one of our old press kits that's still all in the,
right. It was a folded
the
thing in
tape
half
and all that stuff,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to our credit, that was one of the good things was that when that opportunity arose, we were able to jump on it instantly because we already had, our act together.
Yeah, we'd already recorded in Atlanta.
Yeah, our cassette together and all that. So it was like, oh, you're going? Okay, here, boom,
And so, UsherHouse was together for a number of years. We did a bunch of shows, and then things move on like they do. And you, somewhere in there, tell me, I may lose on the sequence of this. You started working with recording music for modern dance, and at the same time, or around the same time, you were working as doing something for Martin Atkins at Invisible Records. And this would kind of send you in a certain direction. So tell us about that.
So like I'd say sort of around mid 90s into the late 90s. Uh, Adelie, who is now my ex-wife, but we were together, and she was a modern dancer and a choreographer. And so I got sort of involved a lot with helping assemble music and write music for her for, like, scores or whatever, soundtracks for her performances. And through her, ended up meeting other choreographers and dancers who are basically, doing their own version of the same thing of what she's doing. And, ended up scoring, probably a dozen or so things for modern dance, and it could be anything from taking maybe a pre-existing song and like chopping it up and looping it or something like that. You're like, oh, I just want that, that 8-bar section, and we're just going to dance to that for 5 minutes. To, composing stuff completely from scratch. And yeah, and also getting involved in certainly with Adelie, more the technical side of it, like
Right.
helping her figure out staging, painting backdrops, props, and rigging things and whatnot, because some dance stuff was more just straight up dance, but a lot of Adelie's stuff sort of crossed over into a bit of like theater.
Okay.
So, there were a lot of props and lighting and backdrops and, so forth that in a lot of cases went with it. So yeah, I sort of, got very actively involved in that world and wasn't really playing in any bands. That was even with the latter days of UsherHouse, before that ended, was kind of coexisting, but then went into that. And then in 2001, I lost my job. I was unemployed, and I remember like Adelie saying like, well, do something you want to do. She was very much into chasing your dream, and so I was like, all right, chasing my dream, something I'd love to do. Martin Atkins was a huge influence on me as a drummer, and also like from the sort of music industry side. He had Invisible Records, and he ran that, and a lot of the things he would write and say about, strength in numbers and unifying and all that, and it was very empowering and inspiring. And around the late 90s, I got interested in running my own label, and I started Len Records and worked with a couple people to put out records. But then in 2001, when I lost my job, I started interning with Martin. So I was basically, there every day, pitching in, basically for free. He had an office manager at the time. After a few months, she wasn't there anymore. And I went to him and said, I'd love to be here, but I need to make some money. I need to get paid. Cause I was doing it for free. And, like I said, he had a vacancy for an office manager. So he's like, all right, let's do it. You're my guy. So then I started, office managing and being basically his label manager, full time, or I should probably say over full time, whatever term you want to use. But
Sure.
It was, it was, a massive thing. It was huge. It was inspiring. It was great working next to him. Martin is nearly impossible to sort of keep up with, because he would come up with 10 good ideas every day. And you'd be like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do that. And they're like, but that's going to take, 30 hours or something. And
Right.
like, I don't have time to do the stuff you already asked me to do yesterday, let alone, these 5 other things. But yeah, it just, was a pretty amazing experience.
Now he
You
was.
know,
I gotta say, I remember when I first moved to Atlanta, and I had just come from Germany, and I'd been kind of out of any real music scene for a while. It was, Germany. It was all about, big hair metal. I get to Atlanta, and I get invited to a show. It was Ministry, and my experience with Ministry had been the dance ministry, which is, it's fine, but it wasn't my thing. And
yeah,
and I went along thinking, it was just nice to, be social in a new city for me. So I accepted the invitation and I went thinking I was going to see dance ministry. And this was
yeah,
actually, and I may get the record wrong. It was either Mind is a Terrible Thing or Land
yeah.
of Rape and Honey. And I don't remember which one it was, but it was the one with Martin Atkins playing acoustic kit, and who was playing the electronic kit? I can't remember.
Bill Rieflin.
Bill Rieflin. And I just remember, and they were behind the fence with the projection stuff going on and three guitar players up front. And I was just like, whoa. But my focus, my laser focus was right on Martin because he had that head banging thing that he would do. And he was, I mean, just a great drummer. But so what I want to do now is, you are a good drummer too, and it's funny because you can do. I'm going to play a couple different pieces from some UsherHouse stuff, and of course, we'll play some other stuff too. But this is some of the to show the kind of drumming that you didn't do. This was, again, I felt like you took the drums to, it wasn't about 1, 2, 3, and 4. It wasn't about that with you. And so I want to play this first bit, and I'm going to kind of go it to the middle because it has a bit of an intro to it. So let me get it going here. And this was a song that Steve Albini recorded. And so let's see if I can bring it in here. Oh, I remember you recording that stuff at CRC, and I remember that first thwack of the snare, like I don't think anything else was even set up. We're in that room at Chicago Recording Company in that crazy $1 million room, and I was 20 feet away, and you hit that snare, and I thought my head was going to explode. It was just awesome. And Steve Albini did a great job on recording that. And, but I think that's a great song with how you played. I mean, it was just, you know what I mean? It was just awesome. And
Yeah, it's a good example of like the tribal stuff that I picked up on. Again, like sort of in the mid to late 80s, there were a lot of people that started playing like really cool tom rhythms and stuff, and more so than, like for years I didn't have a ride cymbal. I didn't, I don't need that.
Right.
I have my hi-hat, but I didn't have a ride cymbal. And I used to ride a lot on the floor tom, and do those tom things. But yeah, that song, that, I don't know where it came from, but that was my full tilt, lose control song.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you. I think there's another full tilt song. I'm gonna play this. This is actually a video clip, and again, I'm starting it in the sort of towards the end. It's a break of a video that we did. Let me get this pulled up here, and we'll play this a little bit, and then we'll cut away. So here we go.
That was so much fun
That
making that.
that video was fun, but honestly, that part, that drum part, just that was just
There.
really not something that you ever did a whole bunch. And it just was, I mean, it was just amazing. But that was just a great part. And I mean, you carried that out to the rest of the song. And I mean, the timing was good. And I don't know how many takes it took for us to do that in the studio, but I don't think it was that many because we only had like a couple of days to record all that. And so.
Well, no, that was one day.
Right. No, it was a day
Yeah.
of tracking and then a couple of days of mixing. It was like 3 days. Yeah.
But all the backing tracks, definitely the drums. That's why we went to CRC, was that drum room,
right.
that drum sound. Remember, it was
And Steve
it was
told us
Martin's dual drummer attack on the Murder Inc. record.
right.
That was like, oh my God, that's the drum sound I want, and Steve made that record. And so, yeah, it was, but that was one day to get
So
the
you
drum
nailed it.
sounds.
So
and
you
most
just
backing
you
tracks.
nailed it, and you always had great timing, and I mean, which was one of the reasons it was so good to be in a band with you. So then you kind of start rapping through Invisible and Lens, and then you start getting out, and you kind of really weren't playing in bands anymore, and then you started doing something with another guy named Ivan, right? Is that Mr. Rush just
I'm
started?
the only guy on the planet that's been in a band with two different Ivans.
Two different Ivans. Well, it's kind of funny because he's the second Ivan in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm older and I came first, but I'm Ivan the third, so I'm really not the second. I don't know. It gets very confusing.
Yeah, that
But
does.
this is. Let me put this picture up of you guys. I believe this is you guys, right? Is this Mr. Russia here? Hold on a second. I think I cut your audio off there.
2005.
This is 2005. No guitar. This is bass and drums. And Ivan sings. Is that right?
Correct.
Let's play this.
I did a bit as well.
Well, I'm going to play this song. Let me click through a couple of more pictures here. This is you. That's a great shot. And this is still Mr. Russia, right?
Yeah.
Let me play. I really, really like this song. So hold on just a bit here. Here we go.
Shaped like a pistol, see a bell shine. The girl's always pretty when the girl's not mine. I don't mind to watch you suffer. I don't mind to watch you bleed. I don't mind that you're just trouble. I don't mind. You got what I needed was a bang bang romance.
That, I
Just
mean, the
Kind of
record.
a big drum sound. Just sort of.
Where did you guys record that? Because that is probably one of the cleanest, most full sounding recordings I think I've heard you do or be a part of. To be honest with you, it's just the clarity is there. The
Yeah.
mix is really spot on. The tones of the drum, that snare is in the perfect spot, and the bass certainly sounds amazing. How was that recorded?
That's all. I think it's Pro Tools, but it's in a studio here in Chicago in town called Minble.
Okay.
The guy's escaping me now that recorded it. He used to own it. He doesn't own it anymore, but the studio's still there. It's sort of a very live room, but it's not a super like, multi-million-dollar studio or anything
Right.
like that. It was just kind of like an old Chicago space. But yeah, he was able to just get a really great drum sound. And of course, when you're dealing with like our aesthetic, I think we made one. Our very first recording had like the keyboard on it, and then after that, Ivan was like, "Okay, it's all about just you and me," you know.
Right.
So you know, when all you've got is bass and drums, there's a ton of room for pretty much anything you want to play, because nothing's going to mask anything else.
Right.
You know?
Right. No, that's true.
He can be as loud as he wants to be, and you're still going to be able to hear me. So.
There was never an issue.
From a production standpoint, it just really, I think, you know, Ivan would like double track some of that stuff and then also like play it through 2 different amps at the same time. So you'd have like, you know, 3 or 4 different bass tracks all, you know, mixed together to mix to taste. So yeah, just you could create a wall.
For the record, there was never any issue hearing you. That was never like a thing. Okay.
True.
I don't care if we had 2 guitar players, keys, the samples, and all that. There was never like,
but
can anybody hear Robert? I can't hear.
Well, yeah, you know, no, it was never a problem with me being heard. But I remember like because you had such a full guitar sound. Like you could, you know, you had that rig where like you just hit a chord and it would just sustain for like 60 seconds.
Work smart,
and it wouldn't
hard,
actually
not hard.
die away. It would just, you know, it was just this wall. And it was beautiful. It was like a fantastic tone. But like, I remember, I think, you know, recording Caesar's Falling with Steve. And, you know, big drum sound, like, oh my God, this sounds great. And all of a sudden the guitar comes in and like, oh, the room sound is gone. You know, like all the, like, and it just, you know, it was kind of, you know, I love that song. I love that band, but it was also kind of, you know, a little bit heartbreaking for me as a drummer to be like, hear that sound? Well, you only get to hear it for about 10 seconds and then the guitar comes in, you know? And you didn't even like multi-track a lot of stuff. Like a lot of your stuff, like you would multi-track if you had another part, but I don't, maybe
No,
2 tracks.
I didn't do. I did that thing where I played with my effects, which was kind of weird. But because I played off of my effects, so I didn't feel comfortable recording to tape. Maybe a little bit of reverb, but even my reverb was an instrument to me. I didn't think of it as something that was augmenting my guitar. It was its own separate instrument.
Yeah,
and there was no way to add that after the fact because I did things that required me playing off the tails of the reverb. And then we did that thing where, I can't remember his name. When we recorded in Rockford.
Anthony?
It wasn't Anthony. It was the guy Anthony worked for.
Oh, right.
Showed us this thing where I recorded my guitar and he ran it through a delay and then delayed it like 10 milliseconds and ran the output of that delay and made it into 2 tracks, which would be the equivalent of today copying, doubling a track in Pro Tools and just, smudging one up a little bit. Yeah. But, no, I did a lot of my stuff where I just recorded straight to tape. Because again, I needed to play off those effects. It was not inspiring to.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely with your tone, if you had just played that clean, it would have been like,
it
what?
Wouldn't have,
what was that?
worked.
Reamp it or whatever. Yeah. And of course, so many things in the studio, and definitely with Steve, was his whole thing. His greatest gift is that he gets a fantastic tone on tape.
And he got it quickly. The guy did not play around. He knew his gear, got us in and out. So this is actually one of the things I've been kind of excited about. You then went on and I'm going to play another little clip of a Mr. Rush's song first, and then I want to go to the next group. So this song is called The New Standard. So let me play this. This is Mr. Russia, Still You and Ivan. So let me click on this.
She smiles like sunshine. I wonder if she can read my mind. With eyes like the ocean, no diamond could ever outshine. Then she came along and she kissed me, and I swear I never felt this way. When she ran and miss me. All I wanted was for her to stay. She's worthy of applause, and she's...
That's just awesome. I'll be honest with you. When you first told me about that project, I was in my mind, out loud, I was like, yeah, go Rob, keep it up. And in my mind, I was like, no guitar player? Are you kidding me? That's just stupid. Just who
Go, you fool.
That's just, yeah, if you want to try, go ahead. It's going to sound like shit, but but then you played the recordings for me and I was like, wow. It didn't need a guitar. There's nothing in there for what I would call typical guitar to do. It stands by itself.
Yeah, to be fair, that recording, that incarnation of the band actually had another bass player, but a lot of it was, certainly the embryo of it was just Ivan and I. It was Ivan and I for a couple of years.
Sure. Then you keep going along and you end up getting into another group that was called or is called Melter. Tell me about Melter.
So Melter was, I've always sort of dabbled. I love the studio, and I've always sort of just dabbled with sounds and just creating things. And so I don't know, sometime in the early to mid 90s, I just came up with that name for like, oh, that's me, just solo, Melter. So I've got, a handful of tracks and stuff that like I've created over the years, but I never, it was never really anything that I took seriously as far as like I never released any of that stuff or whatever. It was just part of my thing to do, to have fun. And honestly, it was a combination of, I was in Mr. Russia for a handful of years. I was actually in and out of the band a couple of times. I had sort of officially retired, and then Ivan got me to join again. I retired again. And then I was also, after I worked with Martin at Invisible, I started doing Len's after that. And I did that for 7-8 years. And it was a combination of things, but the biggest thing was I was spending a lot of time and money and effort on, certainly with the label, like releasing other people's music. And in Mr. Russia, I was never like totally happy because I have all the studio stuff, and you know our history, and always had, even in UsherHouse, we've gone into samplers and sequencing and all that. And it's funny, I've had, tens of thousands of dollars worth of like studio gear over the years. I'm still playing the same drum set that I got when I was 16. Same kit. Like, I don't need to replace that. It's fine. But I love that kit, so I never necessarily wanted to replace it. But it has never been like a matter of, interest or anything. It was just like, no, this serves me. But my studio is sort of like where my imagination is. And towards the end of Mr. Russia, the last incarnation of it, we toyed with the idea of like, okay, let's open everything up. Let's do whatever we want to do and bring stuff in. And I started bringing in some samples and loops and stuff. And we worked, we wrote a handful of songs, and it just didn't really work for everybody. Everybody was kind of moving in different directions. So I just kind of decided, getting older, if I'm going to spend all this time and effort on music, I want to do my thing,
Right.
And my thing was Melter. I started working on stuff on my own, and then had an opportunity. Ivan came to me with a proposal. He knew this band that was forming here in Chicago, Ganser. He knew Nadia and Alicia from Ganser. They were just getting started, and they wanted to do an EP. But they were trying to look for like somebody to work with to like help them record it and mix it and whatnot. So he came to me and said, "Are you interested in doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so we met them, and, you know, did the EP with them, but I kind of hit it off with Nadia. Nadia was kind of working on the electronics and whatnot in the band and did vocals as well. So I just pitched her this idea. I had just band ideas pop into my head sometimes. I just get inspiration. I can kind of see it, you know, like, oh, that would be cool if I had that thing.
Right.
And so I just asked her, like, you know, hey, are you interested in doing this project with me? She's like, yeah, cool. So she and I started, you know, jamming and creating song ideas. And that was kind of the beginning of Melter being like a band, a serious project. Yeah, we worked together for a couple of years. It was kind of touch and go. She's very busy. Ganser got really busy, and eventually kind of came to a head. You know, a lot of false starts trying to get it off the ground, and about a year ago, sort of early last year, you know, she got in touch with me and said, you know, unfortunately I don't have time to do this anymore. So, you know, she was out. I was sad to see her go, but I totally got it. I understood.
Sure.
I could kind of see the writing on the wall, because I would talk to her, you know, a couple times a month and hardly see her. But at that time, sort of late 2018, I went to Ivan and I said, hey, I want to do Melter as a live thing. And I thought, you know, because we started out as an electronic thing, and I was thinking of like, oh, projections and laptops and all that stuff. And I was like, it's not my thing, you know, just like that's not my gift, you know, I think. And I had the idea of like, I was writing these songs and I thought, oh man, I'd love to play drums to these. I'd love to play live drums on top of these. And so I just thought like, well, what do I do best? I play drums. So, I decided, hey, I want to make this a live thing. And Ivan and I have been playing together for like 20 years now, you know, and we had a handful of bands that we tried to start even before Mr. Russia. And so I just went to him and he was like, yeah, you know, whatever you want. He pretty much gave me a blank check and just said, you tell me what you want me to do and I'm there. And so he and I started rehearsing, trying to figure out how to take these songs that basically Nadia and I had built in the studio and turn them into a live thing, with the idea that we were going to have a vocalist. And then when she dropped out, it was like, okay, we need to find a vocalist. So we put an ad out, and literally like, I think the second day we had an ad, like Ivan just flooded like all these like Facebook pages or something, you know, dark music groups and whatever, you know, and Jax, who is singing with us now, responded, and I think 2 weeks tops, you know, she auditioned, offered her the job on the spot, and, you know, she's been with us ever since. And that was like June of last year.
Now, the songs that I have, who's on what? So I've got, let me play one here. This is...
Well, you maybe start with Gollum.
Okay.
If you've got it queued up, because that was the thing that Nadia and I had done.
Okay. Let me play that, because that's awesome. So let me play this. This is kind of neat. So not kind of neat. It's very neat.
It's neato.
It's neato. Well, I mean, you know, I'll be honest. Before we play it, it's a great song. Again, recorded well. It's the material's good. You guys had a professional videographer do this, and it shows. I mean, the editing is good and all that. So here, let me hit the play on this and see what we see. That's awesome. I mean, there's nothing to criticize on it. That's just awesome. I mean, from the ground up, to see stuff like that that's just put together well, and it's not like some label came up to you and handed you $20,000 and said, "Hey, give us a cool video."
No.
You know, but that looks totally pro. So, and this is Nadia. This is Nadia. Okay,
Yeah.
so now I want to play this next song. Let me pull up my tune list here. Where'd you go, tune list? And this is, should I play Catwalk or should I play Damn? D-A-M.
I don't know. Maybe play Damn. Those two songs are basically like 99.9% finished. We're working on an EP right now, and those are two songs that are going to be on it. So,
and who's on this?
This is Jax and Ivan and I.
Now, is this, let me pull this up here, and then I'll play this under it. Let me, you got to be 10% smarter in the equipment you use here. Is this the current photo? Is this the current lineup?
It is.
Let me play this tune then, so everybody just hang on.
Have to learn how to unlearn, but I don't know how to leave well enough alone. Baby strikes me lost in front of a sea of buzzing minds. I'm fishing with my hands. Close my eyes, just like yesterday. Into the strength, got me one more fucking day. Turn to the sun, just like yesterday.
Wow. Are you guys shopping that? You guys should shop that. I mean, that's what's that? What's that face about?
Dude, I got my own label. I don't need nobody.
Don't need to shop nothing, man. That's awesome. I mean, that's really, really good. And so where is this being recorded or put together? You said it's 99% done. Are you doing this in your own studio?
Yeah, it's 100% in my studio. We recorded a few things in our live space.
Okay.
The vocals and the bass. Everything else is in my studio.
I mean, that sounds really, really good. I mean, are you guys doing this? Is this iteration playing out live? You said it was playing out live?
Yeah. We did two shows late last year.
Okay.
It took us a handful of months just to, like, once Jax got involved, to get polished up, get ready, get the word out, start gigging. We did a show. Our first show was about this time last year. It was a Halloween show. And then we did one in November. And we usually, like, Ivan and I, work-wise, both get really busy, like December, January.
Sure.
So we kind of took that period off, and then we were, ready to go sort of February, March, and then, COVID, and
don't say COVID.
no more shows.
Let me put these other pictures up here. Hold on just a second. Let's see here. Now this is Ivan, is that right? And
Yeah.
this is you guys playing at the Cubby Bear.
Yeah.
That's a great shot. I don't know who took that, but that's a great shot. And this is Jax.
Yeah.
Another great shot. And look at you. That's the money shot right there.
Hey, you can light me well. I don't look good in natural light, but I do in, Rudy light.
Oh my gosh.
I clean up well.
Well, you had enough practice. I mean, that's really good. I'm serious. I know you got your own label. I know you got all that stuff. You should shoot that over to Cleopatra or something. Have them take a listen to it. That's really good stuff. I mean,
Yeah, thanks.
that's as good as anything I've heard you do, if not probably the best thing I've heard you do. So this incredibly complicated thing that is over your right shoulder, this is your scary brain turned inside out. Tell me about some of this stuff. This is analog gear. You kind of, you still use digital stuff, but you're an analog guy a lot. You're all about the wires and the patches and the, that kind of thing.
Yeah, honestly, to be fair, it's not necessarily all analog. Actually, a lot of these modules are digital.
Okay.
But it's a modular synth, which is sort of an old idea reborn.
Okay.
This is kind of how synth started back in 50s, 60s, 70s. They started out as individual pieces. So if you know the architecture of a synthesizer, these pieces are basically those sections broken out into separate pieces.
Okay.
So you've got like your oscillator, you've got your envelopes, LFOs, filters, VCAs, amps.
What's the inspiration? Is it the tactile nature of it, that it's not mouse and click? Is it what's the drive?
There's a combination of things, but yeah, the main thing is the tactile. Obviously nowadays a lot of synths, in the last 15, 20 years started to become tactile again.
Sure.
Sort of virtual analog synths, and so you had knobs and stuff to play with, and you could kind of tweak the sound more quickly. You could just grab a knob and turn it and turn the sound. But the other thing that's so fascinating about this, and my friend Rich down in Georgia was the first person I knew personally that was into modular. He has a pretty modest modular rig. But when I first got introduced to it, I just thought like, well, if I've got a synth, why do I need to break it all out into these pieces? And honestly, when you break it out into pieces, it ends up costing a lot more than it does if you just buy a pre-made synth. So if you just want to walk up to a keyboard and get a sound instantly, a synth is the way to go. But the thing with the synth, a preset sort of synth, is that everything is routed in a very specific way. There are levels of flexibility there, but to speak generally, it's already pre-configured. You've got your oscillators, all this stuff, and everything's sort of internally wired so that it's quick and easy to go, and you can generate a sound quick. The fun thing about this, and this is where the light bulb for me went off, is that you can have an oscillator going into a filter, going into, an envelope, etc., or not. And by just the very nature of all of these holes, these patch points, you can essentially patch anything into anything else. And so it really becomes this sort of mad scientist laboratory of sound where I can literally, patch in stuff that sort of doesn't even make any logical sense why you would patch those into each other. And it starts making crazy sounds, and they're really cool sounds. So it's just really fun from a pure, just sit and create sound standpoint. If you're interested in that sort of sound design and just making sounds that you have never heard and maybe nobody else has ever heard, this is one of the best ways to do it and the most fun. And it's kind of a Zen thing of now I have nights where hey, I've had a long day, I'm exhausted, I worked all day, I did whatever, I just want to go downstairs and patch, and I'll pull all this out and I'll just start patching stuff together. And, I've got hours of, recordings in my computer of me just patching, and I'll just record it. Just, because one of the cool things about it is as you start patching and turning knobs, all of a sudden you get something that's like, oh my God, that's really cool. And if you're not recording it, it's gone. A lot of this stuff is nearly impossible to get it back.
I bet. I'm looking at that and I'm going, there's no preset. There's no presets.
Yeah.
How do you live without a preset?
Exactly.
Have you ever thought about doing that live?
Yeah,
you
ahead.
should stream that. You should totally interface that into Facebook and live it out and Friday nights at midnight or whatever, and just seriously just take us on a ride. That looks awesome.
Yeah, it's if I turn this on now, it wouldn't be all that exciting. It's just like playing a drum part right now, just because I was messing with some drum programming the other night. But one of the other projects, Think, with some of the stuff I sent you.
Yeah.
My friend Chris Turner and I, he and I have known each other for 20 years now as well. And that's kind of what he and I do. It's very sort of electronic, experimental, very freeform. And we've done several performances, a handful of performances where it's literally, we bring our stuff and we set it up and we just create on the spot for 30, 45 minutes. And we've even, some of the stuff we've released has been literally a stereo recording of us performing, or, performing live in the studio, just to a stereo file. And there you go. It's done. There's definitely levels of sort of premeditation to it. But a lot of times we get to the premeditation by, well, let's just, start plugging stuff in and see what we come up with. And then we go, oh, that's cool. That's good. Let's hold on to that and then build from there.
Let me play a little bit of, this is called, Retrograde Thrust, as it were. Let me get this queued up, and let's listen to, I'm going to bring it into the middle though a little bit. So let me kind of, here we go. I like that. That's very tasty. Do you guys layer that? Do you guys just loop and then build on the loop, or?
Yeah. To be fair, like that one is actually everything kind of comes out of a jam that we do. But a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll maybe I'll take a stereo feed out of my rig and I'll take a stereo out of Chris's. And we're jamming at the same time, but then I'm recording that, and then we'll go back later and sort of listen, and then we might like the drum track in there is, something we came up with, and then we said, okay, later that was sort of assembled in the studio, which is just a bunch of little pieces of things that we did throughout, say, an hour-long jam, that we then just cobble little pieces together and start to, construct a song out of all of these pieces.
Is this any kind of portable at all? I mean, are you guys in any danger of doing this live?
Oh, we have. We have done it live. Yeah.
Like taking this to
yeah.
a venue and played.
We have.
Wow. That sounds
Yeah.
like a nightmare. I mean, I bet it sounded good, but I mean, I'm just looking at all those patch cables, and I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah. Well, like these cases, these are two separate cases. They have a lid that goes on them. They pull out very easily. There's like a thing that joins them together. So yeah, I mean, I could dismantle that and pack it up in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Now, granted, I can't necessarily leave all of these cables. Like if they're patched internally, like these, it's going from here to there. That's fine because these can collapse and the lid can go on top. But something like this that's going from here, or from here up to there, I have to pull that. But you can just make notes of like, oh, that plugs into there. This one plugs into there, and you can pull it. But honestly, even when we do like that, within the performance, I'm still patching stuff. It's just a starting point.
Right. No, I'm assuming there's some amount of, evolving as this goes. And if you're kind of doing it on the fly,
yeah,
certain amount of randomness, I'm assuming as well.
And honestly, it depends. I mean, there's people that perform with the modular, that they leave it patched for like a year. They don't unpatch anything because they've created this intricate patch of how they want everything to run, and they're gigging and they're like, they're writing more like maybe sort of, beat driven electronic sort of techno or something like that. They just like any band, any performance, you have a sort of, certain expectation to uphold when someone comes to see you. And if your thing is like, oh, I got beats and I got, things you can dance to and whatnot, you can't do a lot of mad patching in that because it's just too complex, So you patch it all together and then you leave it. But there's still, even though it's sort of, pre-patched and pre-configured, there's still a lot of things, depending on what modules you're using and stuff, that you can patch that throw a whole lot of random and chaos and sort of unknowns into it. And as you get versed in it, you kind of develop how comfortable you are with that level of, chaos and randomness and unknown.
Right. And the sound guys are like, man, just don't send me any sub 200 or 20 hertz things. I'll kill you.
Oh yeah. You can blow entire PAs with these things.
Well, don't do it.
The ones that are savvy have a low, they actually make a module that's a low frequency roll off.
Gotcha.
That sort of cuts all, from like 60 hertz down. It just sort of kills all that stuff.
Well, do you send that into like a mixer and then send the sound guy a stereo feed? Is that what you're doing? I mean, basically, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for the most part.
Do you ever take your live drums and mix that with that?
We did a little bit. The first couple performances Chris and I were doing years ago, he and I used to rehearse in the practice space that we have, and I had some drums so that I'd play standing up, and I incorporated some of that, but not so much like the full kit.
Gotcha. So it's really interesting to go through these songs and, some of them going back over 30 years and then listening to this progression of sound where it's not just your interest and your writing ability has changed, but also the technology has changed too. I wonder what it must be like to be, somebody in their early 20s today, late teens, and have access to all of this stuff. What does it change for them? But I think it's really cool, to do this kind of with you where we can kind of see, how it goes. It's just awesome. It's just really awesome. And I got to say, it's very impressive to hear what you've done and how you've done it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's funny. I know you might remember even sort of mid-90s when we lived in the loft and we used to rehearse in there. Mm-hmm. I started to sort of tap into some of these ideas.
You did. You had
I didn't have this stuff.
You had You had some kind of synth thing. You had some Alesis or some kind of drum pad, little round drum pads, and you would go in there, and you were back then. In fact, I was almost going to play it tonight, but ended up not doing it. But you were very big into recording things. You would make some of your sounds by hand and go stick a mic up in like a sound designer for a movie almost, where you would I remember you took some blocks and made like a snapping sound that by the time it was all amplified, it came across like a snare. And I think you did some metal slidey things. And, you were, even back then you were, texture was the word we used, and sometimes we said clutter, but it was.
I was in charge of clutter.
You were in charge of clutter. You were the clutter guy, and but that's what brings the songs out. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes if that's the coolness of it. Those, it's not the guitar playing solid, it's not the bass playing solid or whatever. Sometimes it's that one-off shot that that maybe gets done once or twice in a song, and it's maybe the headphone mix that you can only hear like kind of in the back on the left or whatever. So that's good stuff though. I mean, that's really good stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting because I think I've realized about myself that like I've always been really interested in that sort of stuff, sort of those textures and sound. And I can sit in here and just like create a drone. I can just let one of these oscillators just drone and, throw a big reverb on it or something like that and just listen to that for like an hour and just kind of fill the room. And, a lot of people would probably just scratch their head and be like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on? But I think that again, it's that sort of the chicken or the egg. Like I didn't go seeking that, but when I found like ambient music and using the studio as an instrument, the idea, I mean, there's things you can do in the studio that you can't do necessarily live. You can't execute live. You can't pull it off. So that's always been really interesting to me. And and just sort of enjoying sound, just a really interesting sound. And that, I will a lot of times, like now, even with Melter stuff, I'll sit in here and I'll just, patch and play around with this. And then I'll come up with some sort of loop or, a drum thing or something that's melodic or rhythmic. And that will be the embryo of a song, and I'll just go, oh, this is a really cool idea. Like I'll send stuff to Jax all the time. And like, she's my writing partner in Melter. And, she gets off on it too. Like we'll be working on something and all of a sudden, like I'll play a sound. She'll be like, ooh, what was that? That's really cool. What is that? That's awesome. I love that. It's like, what about the drum part and the bass part? And no, I just like that cool little squiggly sound in the background. That's really cool.
Where it starts, right? That's where inspiration starts. Sometimes it is that one spark that pushes everything else forward. I mean, there's like something like 1.8 billion songs that have, bass, guitar, drums, and vocals on it, and 4/4 time, and there's 12 notes, and that's all there is, right? But I mean, sometimes it's, and people do variations on that, and they do it well, and it doesn't mean it's not special, but sometimes it is that what drives that sometimes is that, wow, what was that little melody you just did? What was that little sound can you do that again? Or can you do that again, but add this thing to it? That's how I think that's how some of the best songs probably came about.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, it's a different way of writing music for sure. Again, some people write, you probably do this, you write from the quote unquote singer-songwriter standpoint of, I've got some chords, I've got a melody, I've got some words, and, all of that goes into what I do as well, but it's rarely the thing that starts it. Right. It's more a drum groove or a bass part or a melody and, some weird sound. And it's that I can hear a sound like that. And it just it puts it into like a space. It puts it into like a headspace, a creative, it gives you some sort of like mental image or whatever. It just gives you a mood and a texture. And that, like you said, that can be that embryo to just sort of start cobbling things to go with that fit into that same mood and aesthetic.
Well, I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I just found that that's, you know, that's my gift. That's, you know, that's what I'm good at.
Among other things. Well, Robert, I want to say thank you for sitting down with me tonight. I hope that you will do it again.
Yeah,
I am going to say goodnight, but thanks for taking the time out and, you know, just going through some of this stuff. I have been, you know, in awe of your talents from pretty much the day I met you. And I hope, you know, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. You're involved in some good projects with some good people. Keep it up is what I would say.
yeah.
And so have
you.
a good night and have a good weekend.
All right, man. Thanks. Love you. Thanks for doing this.
Catch you later, man. So I gotta say, you know, we do the you know, I like to end on some kind of message, and I think what I got out of tonight's interview was that spark that begins something cool. And so I would say, yeah, I mean, that's not just music. I mean, that's life, right? I mean, find that thing, that one thing that makes you go, hey, what was that? That's interesting. Let's take that forward. Let's explore this idea out to its fullest and make it into something bigger than it started out as. And I think that's, you know, I think that can be applied to a lot of things, not just music, not just art. It could be a cool building project. It could be a business plan. It could be, you know, a lot of things. It might be a way that, you know, a relationship is started with somebody. But find that. Look for those little bits and pieces that make you go, hey, what is that? I want to know more, and I want to explore that. So I do want to thank Robert again for his time. It was awesome doing this. I am going to take us out with another Melter song. And I wish all of you guys well, and thanks for listening, and I will see you again.